welcome. We're just hit the button a little bit early, about a minute early here, just to say hello and get to know you a little bit before we get started. And we're glad that you showed up. I see that we have Jay, and Mandy and Melissa have shown up so far, and Aniqua. Hopefully I got that name right. I'm Abraham Vanismach, and I am the owner partner of the Customer Service Professional Network. We have over 200,000 members, and you might be one of us. So, tell us, how's it going? It's kind of crazy with this coronavirus. I mean, we're here. I'm in Israel, and my partner here, we see Shahar, or we call him Shaq. He's in Israel, and Shane here is he's in Las Vegas. So, tell us where you guys are from, and what's going on. How's it going over there? Say hello. Okay, got some shy people over here.
Can they unmute, or did you unmute all of them?
What's that? They can unmute, but hang on. We don't want to start getting some cross things. We're at 8 o'clock. We're starting right now. So
hey, everyone.
Okay. So I'd like to introduce you to Shane Green here. He is the president and founder of SGEI, which is Shane Green International. And he is also an author of the book, The Culture Hacker, which is a pretty amazing book. Shane, tell us a little bit about yourself and about Culture Hacker before we get started, and then we'll go right into giving these people some good stuff. This is not going to be one of those webinars. We're just trying to, sell you on stuff. You're going to get some real value. This is a real teaching webinar here. And also, for sure, we do have a special offer for you. You would expect that, but that comes at the end. Please stay with us. We have some really good stuff for you, but you are going to get some amazing value here. Oh, I see JJ's from he's from South Alabama, and we have Melissa, she's from Canada, Mandy from Minnesota, and Aniqua from South Africa. Wow, we got a world crew over here. I hope you guys are staying healthy and staying safe. I want to, give you guys blessings that you should stay safe and healthy. And without further ado, let me introduce Shane here. Shane, take it away.
Thanks, guys. Hi, guys. Hi. Thanks for taking some time out to join us today. I know there's a lot going on in our lives. Things are getting pretty crazy down there. We're pretty isolated. So this is actually a nice way to connect back out. And when you think about it, this is probably the way that we're going to be connecting to for a while. So I really appreciate you guys checking in with us today. Again, if you know a little bit about me, my background is in hospitality. I've run hotels, worked for different hotel companies, the Ritz-Carlton, Cipriani, Starwood Hotels, done a lot of different things in the hospitality industry, but I've had a culture consulting program for the last sort of 10 years, really focusing on trying to elevate the employee experience. I'm originally from New Zealand, so, just to add to the worldly sort of mix that we've got on the call today. So you'll probably hear a bit of an accent floating in, but I am based here in Las Vegas. For those of you that are joining us here in the US, we know it's a pretty isolated and locked down place, but Las Vegas particularly, last night was the first time it had been completely dark in many a year. So listen, things are changing. What I think we want to be able to do today is just share with you some elements that I think provide some great insights around how to coach your employees correctly. Something that we've utilized for many years to a lot of success with a lot of different big organizations. We work, some of our biggest clients is United Airlines, BMW, the NBA, MGM Resorts here, all that are under duress right now as a result of the virus, but also all that have found vast amounts of success in creating great customer experiences by focusing on maximizing the talents of their employees and, of course, elevating their performance along the way. So we're going to talk a little bit about that today, just to give you some of these ideas. I'm going to kind of share a couple of ideas that we've got that you can do while you're in isolation or sort of coaching virtually from home. Because, again, just because we are from home, it doesn't mean that our leadership stops. We want to be able to still have an impact on our employees and certainly keep them engaged while we can during this time. So thank you for that. So again, Abraham, thanks for getting us on today. So anything else before we get underway?
Just want to let everybody know that if you have any questions, just put them in the chat, and at the Q&A time, Shane's going to get to them. So we'll try to make sure everybody gets their questions answered.
All right, perfect. So guys, thank you so much. Let's kind of get underway. So the biggest thing that I think is most interesting is that you have to understand what performance is. Traditionally, performance has been really around what has been achieved. It's been about results. And for the most time, it was who sold the most, who served the most, who did the most. It was all about numbers. What we've found over the sort of the last 10 years that's been trending is that if you just focused on what's achieved, you're actually missing out on an important part of performance because it has to be defined against how it's achieved as well. The best way I can find it, BMW, we did some coaching for a group of sales managers. And it was very interesting because we had a group of sales managers. I think there was about 20 of them. And there was one sales manager that was just kind of the rock star, very, very good at what they did and getting the numbers. And look, we sort of looked up on the wall. And I think for the last 18 months, this guy had been the #1 salesperson at this dealership. And obviously, so, you know, he was the sort of the star of the show, and the general manager there loved what he did and wished all the other salespeople could be just like this one guy. We'll call him John. What was interesting as we started to kind of work with this group a little bit more, and we actually started to talk to some of the other people, is that while John achieved the most, the way he went about it was pretty disrespectful. He would go through people, over people. He upset people. He was quite unacceptable in some of his behavior, certainly some of his comments, but he was a real loner. He really didn't buy into the old team. And so one of the recommendations we kind of made was that, you know what, John had to be kind of pulled into line. And the general manager was kind of shocked at this. You know, here it is as his #1 salesperson. And we said, well, you know, quite honestly, if we were being honest, we'd actually get rid of John because of the effect that they're having on the overall sales team, the other 19 people. As I said, the GM was just shocked and obviously sent us on our way because he was like, that's absolutely the craziest thing I've ever heard. Anyway, about a couple months later, we were talking to the general manager, and there's actually a lawsuit that came from a couple of the salespeople against this one guy, John. And the general manager was like, hey, I think some of the stuff you were talking about might be true. You know what, I've now got to deal with some legal situations. I'm going to, you know, make this decision to let this guy go, but I could really do use some help to kind of bring the rest of the team around. So John was let go. We did a little bit of work with the team. What was most amazing was about within 3 months, everyone, or actually all but one, so of the 19 other salespeople, 18 had surpassed all their numbers. So from a sales perspective, the morale had jumped something like 20 percentage points. And what was most interesting is that overall sales for the dealership had gone up. And so that's why I come back to this idea of performance. You know, to be a coach, you've got to, you know, obviously elevate performance, but understand what it is. It's not just about getting the desired results, but it's focusing also on how certain results are achieved. And coaching is just the process of improving it. And again, through feedback, reinforcement, and conversations. So when we talk to a lot of organizations and highlight a lot of the very important leadership elements that are critical, we really see this whole idea of performance coaching as being one of those critical elements that all managers must be actively engaged in. Now, one of the big pieces is feedback, and probably the most important thing that we talk about, or we find ourselves talking about a lot, is this idea of feedback. It's giving information to someone to reinforce the behavior or help them improve it. This feedback comes in many different ways, formal and informal. And a number of things we're going to talk today, maybe in sort of the more formal element. But what we want you to understand is that when it comes to feedback, it needs to be specific, timely, balanced, and based on questions, not statements. These are the fundamental sort of foundational elements on which all feedback should be, which means be very specific about what you're giving feedback on, giving them a reason for it. Try to be as timely as possible. There's nothing worse than getting feedback days, weeks, months later. At that point, it's really irrelevant. Balanced means you've got to, you know, balance the good with the bad. What often we find employees will tell us is that the only time they ever hear from the manager is when things go wrong. This is obviously a problem. You know, coaches have to be very good at pointing out what goes right. And we often find that managers need to overly focus on when things go right. We've become really good with our sort of sixth sense to always know the moment something goes wrong. What we have to be able to do is really make sure we're also focusing on all the things that our people do right each and every day. And then the final part, which is probably fundamentally one of the biggest ahas, is that whenever you're giving feedback, asking questions is a really important part of that. Rather than just making statements, you know, ask the employees, how they perform, what impact their performance is having, positively or negatively, what things they could do to improve or maintain or even elevate what they're doing. One of the best things that we've looked at as we've studied a lot of leaders is that the best coaches ask the most questions. And so if you take one thing sort of out of today in terms of your leadership style, think about, do you ask a lot of questions, or are you more in the style of making a lot of statements? If you can find yourself with a habit of sort of asking questions more, being very curious about performance, how did we get here? What can we do to maintain it? You're going to be in a really good space in terms of your ability to elevate performance and also maximize talents. I do want to put a little plug in there for informal feedback before we get into some of the more formal elements. Informal feedback is just these everyday, casual, in-the-moment conversations. Nothing's written down. Nothing's kind of formalized in any way. We find that a lot of managers are very more comfortable with formal. They like writing it down, and I know certain HR teams really emphasize that from a protection and a legal element. And what happens is we forget about informal, everyday casual conversations about performance, just checking in with someone, asking questions, how they're doing, how they're performing, what they need help with. This is absolutely critical, and it's the whole basis of coaching is these quick little conversations. And by making sure that you're always out there working with your team, working alongside them, asking questions, seeing things they do well, seeing things they could improve on, what happens is that the formal feedback mechanisms, performance reviews, discipline, even recognition, they have foundations. Many times we do assessments in large organizations all the time, and we often find that people or managers are too focused on the formal, but employees are frustrated. Maybe you've had this. Often we hear about a review. An employee has a performance review, and it's a shock to them. What they're hearing is like they've heard this for the first time, and it's like you may have had something happen to you like that. And that's really frustrating. And what that tells us is that these everyday casual conversations are not happening. So really think about that in terms of your style. How often are you out there with your employees talking about performance, not only what they're achieving, but how they're achieving it, asking questions about it, because it sets the foundational elements for everything else that might fall into the more formal elements. And that's what I'm going to sort of talk to you today and spend some time on. It is just about some of these formal coaching things to consider. And the format that I've put in front of you is GE used what they call the 4 types of managers. We've evolved it a little to the 4 types of employees. And what we've found is this is a very effective way to start to understand the type of coaching your employees or your various employees need. And so I kind of put this up here for you today. And again, you'll see that performance is on an axis. Delivers results, doesn't deliver results. Supports values, does not support values. The reason we use the word values is values in an organization generally defines how people should act and interact. So that's really the how element. So again, if you put all your organizational values up there, maybe like teams, respect, creativity, you start to see if people are performing in that way. So on one axis, I've got the how, and I just got supporting values. The other one is, did they deliver the results? And so you've got 4 types of employees, and this is really effective to start thinking about your team overall. Where do all of your employees fall? Now, the first box, I'm going to call this a type 1. They deliver results and they support values. These are your dream employees. Hopefully you've got lots of these people. But when it comes to coaching, you need to focus on recognition and empowerment with them. You need to recognize them, and you need to make sure that you're empowering them. What I mean, delegating tasks to them, allowing them to make decisions. That's a very important element for these high-performing people. When we've done our research and looked out, generally, you've got 20 to 25% of your employees in your team fall into this category. They're rock stars. They're awesome at what they do. They give you the results. They support your values. Quite honestly, you don't really need to do too much with them other than recognize and let them sort of make decisions. So consider that. Which of those people in your team today fit into that category? And then ask yourself, are you recognizing them enough and empowering them enough? Giving them enough leeway to make decisions, take on, maybe delegate certain tasks to them. It means you're growing them. So it's really important that you're focused on this for your best people. What about the ones that support the values? So they're very good team players, good people, but they don't get the results. In this case, we do what we call support and enable. They're good people, so you want to support them. And when it comes to enablement, it means you look to see if they need more training, more information, more tools to be successful. You put it on yourself to really think about what they need to get them to deliver the desired results. They're generally very committed. They'll do whatever it takes. But it's very important for you to kind of put that idea, what do I need to do? And it's often training to get them to where it needs to be. The one caveat I will say about this group is that this support and enablement doesn't go on forever. You don't have an unlimited, you have to put a timeline in, which means you may give them like a couple of months to get up and running, apply some training, do different things. But here's something that we've learned a lot about our twos. Really good people, great team players. They might not be able to deliver you the right results because they're in the wrong position. Always think about that. We find a lot of these people are in the wrong jobs, wrong roles, and it's amazing. You shift them into a better role that suits their skills, and they quickly move over into the one category. So think about that. Then we have our threes. I guess this would be kind of like, to a degree, the Johns I was talking about before in the car dealership. They deliver results, but they do not support your values, which means they're not good team players. They're not respectful. There's all of these things. In this case, your coaching style means you got to have some tough conversations. I want to put it out there now. You don't want to lose these people because obviously they're great performers. But if you don't have tough conversations and bring them into line, what you saw in the example I gave you in the beginning is that the overall team performance will suffer. So part of your coaching is how to have a really good, tough conversation. And so that's an important piece we'll touch on. And then when you got one more group, let me see, they don't support the values, they don't deliver the results, what would you do with them? Well, you probably have to make a tough decision. And I will tell you it is a tough decision. Why? Even though it might be obvious, anytime you have to let someone go is a tough decision. And so you want to keep that in mind, that while it might seem obvious, as we'll touch on, we find there are so many instances of employees that might fit into this category of 4 that aren't let go because of some of the things that we'll talk about a little bit later. So I wanted to kind of put this out there. And as I said, even though this framework may seem a little outdated, it's a really great way for you to start thinking about how to be a coach and what your people need from you as a coach, because it's not just one size fits all. So I just wanted to kind of take us through some of these slides. Just dig a little deeper into some of this and talk a little bit more about what you could be doing. And along the way, kind of take some notes, things that might resonate with you. But it always starts with, I want you to kind of think, all right, these are my employees today. Where do they fit? I got 5 or 6 of them sitting in the group 1. I got a couple in the group 2. Unfortunately, you might have a group 3, and you may even have a group 4. But be honest about that. We're not, we're not having to kind of show up, but be very honest where everyone sits. And then you start to create your coaching plan. And so this is where we kind of take us down into the more formal road. So let's talk about our type 1s. I want to recognize and empower them. What do we do? Listen, I think I'm not going to sort of overstate this, but listen, we all know if employees get recognized, it's just a good thing. Employees enjoy it. It helps with so many aspects of their performance. Reinforcing, it just makes them feel great. Here's something that we've found, and again, I want to spend more time on this idea. We look through a lot of data. We're very fortunate. We get to do a lot of review a lot of survey satisfaction data, employee satisfaction data. One of the things when it comes to recognition that we think is most interesting is that employees think managers could always do better at recognition, and most managers think they do a great job at recognition. And there's this amazing gap. And so for the last couple of years, we've actually been digging into this. And what we've found is that most managers, and we've looked at a lot of managers, and they, for the most part, they recognize, they'll say thank you. They're actually pretty good at it. What's happening is the employee is not connecting with the employees. And we started to think about, well, why would, if a manager says thank you to an employee, they wouldn't take it on as meaningful? So go back to some of our important feedback mechanisms. Was it timely? Well, if the recognition was outdated, it didn't connect. Was it specific? If the recognition wasn't tied to a specific task or something that they did, again, it kind of goes right over the top of the head. Was it based and engaged in a conversation around questions? Hey, what could we do to get you better at this? We started to understand that even though a manager might say thank you quite a bit, many times it's not being recognized by the employee. And what we've found is that the managers don't understand some very simple principles about how people process. And so I want to give this to you. It's called the VAC model. Nothing too exciting. It's been around. It basically says there are three ways, overgeneralized but main ways that people process information: visually, auditory, or kinesthetic. This model's been around for many years, but I use it to highlight that processing information like a thank you isn't always about just saying thank you. What do I mean by that? Well, our auditory people, they listen and they process information from speaking. So if you were to say thank you to them, it's actually very easy for them to process it. Our visual people, they like to see it written down. So all of a sudden, if you say thank you to a visual person, it's not easy or quickly for them to process that information. But if you were to put it down on a piece of paper or a card and give it to them, they would get it straight away. Then we have our challenging group, which is the kinesthetics. You see, these kinesthetics are touchy-feely, doing type people. They got to get in and kind of rummage around a little bit. I think one of the biggest challenges we see, and again, even in our school systems, almost half the world are kinesthetic learners, which means for them to process things, they kind of got to touch it, feel it, do it. What does that mean for recognition? Well, we created a model that's kind of say, write, do. And what I want to kind of get across, and again, it's very simplified, is that understand that to personalize and customize recognition, you've got to think about these three, and again, this is overgeneralized, different ways to do it. So, recognition, say, all right, we've got it, say thank you. And again, just making sure it's sincere, authentic, or you've heard about all those. One of the things that we'll say is like, be careful of saying thank you too much. And again, saying thank you. If you're a manager that says thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you, quite honestly, people start to kind of, drown you out. So make sure your thank yous, your verbal thank yous are meaningful. Remember, be specific about what you're being thankful for. Be timely, make sure it's as close to the activity as possible. As I said, and then make sure you're asking questions about what sort of positive impact their behavior had, whether it's a customer, another employee, because when you ask that question and they connect impact, they'll start to process that recognition a lot better. So for some people, just say it. For other people, as I said, you might want to write it down. And this is where I always say every manager should have thank you cards, thank you post-it notes, whatever it is. Please have those available because there is a certain population of your employees that just want to see it written down. So take time. And again, it can be an email, though, as I said, I would urge you to do a little bit of old school. Taking a few moments to write a note to somebody, again, being specific, being timely, and then following that up with a question of how did that make them feel is a really good tactic. So think about your recognition. When was the last time you wrote recognition to one of your employees? And then my fun team, my doers, my kinesthetics. This is where you've got to really get out and work alongside them. We've been doing, as I sort of said, this research around this idea for a couple of years, and we've started to capture what we think is some really great best practices that managers are doing to show recognition. Things like buying them a cup of coffee, taking them to lunch, all good stuff. One of the favorite ones that we love is doing a task that the employee doesn't like doing themselves. Paperwork or something like that. It kind of seems really simple, but we found that to have a really huge impact in how it made people feel. Even just working alongside an employee is a tremendous way just to show some recognition. Of course, the doers, they like the reward. I often talk about they need to have their cake and eat it too. So they need to actually taste the cake. And that means, I get the recognition. So if buying them a piece of cake or if their favorite snack, they really do get that and it processes it for them so very, very well. So I want you to think about in your recognition strategy, you've got your ones. I want you to make sure you're spending a lot of time on recognizing them and empowering them. As I said before, one of the best things you can do, particularly with our kinesthetics, is let them make more decisions, let them take on additional elevated tasks, and maybe even delegate some of your leadership tasks to them. They see that as a form of recognition. So think about utilizing that. So make sure, one of the things that we learned is that often we don't spend enough time with our ones. We take them for granted a little bit. You need to have a recognition strategy. You need to know what works for them. So try a couple of things. Send them a card. Did it have a better impact? Work alongside them. there's a lot of little trial and error. But what I want you to do is understand that just saying thank you only really targets a smaller population of your employee base. And in certain industries, a very smaller base. So that's kind of my recognition strategy. My type 2, support and enable, relatively simple. I kind of touched on this. It's about the whole servant leadership kind of approach that I'm very much focused on. As I said before, if someone's not getting the results you need, but they're good people, you kind of want to spend some time and work out, okay, what do they need from me? Number one thing is probably training. We found number 2 was they didn't have the tools or the right tools to do the job, or in some cases, they didn't know how to use the tools. So that was a really important sort of aha, is that you're expecting results from them. You kind of assume they knew how to use, use a pen. Let's use that as a very simple thing. Obviously everyone knows how to do it, but you kind of make that assumption, oh yeah, everyone knows how to write that. Go back and look to see if they know how to use the tools to be successful on the job. It's kind of important. And then the other one was information. They lacked certain information. It wasn't coming to them in a way that was allowing them to be successful. So, I love servant leadership. Servant leadership is about, being focused on your people. When you've got someone who's not getting the right results, I think this is where servant leadership comes to the fore. I think this is where it's most important. And your role is to really work with this person and try and help them to get the results. As I said, don't think this is an unlimited reservoir of your time. You usually put them on 30, 60 days, kind of improvement plans, try a couple of different things, really watch closely. But as I sort of said, sometimes we find that the wrong people are in the wrong jobs. They'll never be successful. And yet a good person transferred into another role that they'd be more comfortable with is a really great thing. We really, these people that are great team players that just exude the values of the organization, you want to do anything you can to keep them. However, I will say, you still have to get results. So as I said, sometimes they even become a tough decision, unfortunately, because even though they're great people, you still have to have that balance when it comes to performance. Tough conversations. I kind of touched on this, our Johns. Here's the piece that's so important, guys, is that, and again, I go back to my example with John. As a leader, you have to make sure that there's not 2 or 3 sets of rules. What was happening in that car dealership with John was that the general manager was allowing them to get away with stuff. Was allowing them to get away. And so you're creating multiple sets of rules, which creates a lot of frustration with a lot of good people. So you got to make sure sometimes you got to have tough conversations. And I know they're tough because we're not comfortable with it. I love this quote from Peter Bromberg. I urge you all, to remind yourself when you're about to avoid a difficult conversation, okay, you're trading short-term discomfort for long-term dysfunction. Fantastic. Keep that in front of you because it is, it's a little uncomfortable. Got to have a tough conversation. And I'm going to tell you now, you have to have a tough conversation with your 3s. You've got to make it clear that being disrespectful, not being part of a team, or whatever it is that they're doing or not following your values is not acceptable. You have values for a reason. And you got to let them know you want them to be a part of this with you. You want them in the conversation. You want them, to continue to do them. Generally, we find these 3s are extremely smart people. But if they've been allowed to get away with stuff for a very long period of time, unfortunately, sometimes it's hard for them to change. I often find this is probably the biggest challenge of new, younger managers with older, very tenured employees. The employees have been doing it one way forever. You come in and you're like, hey, what else? They're not adhering to our values. They're not adhering to basic rules of decency. What am I going to do about this? This is the ultimate short-term discomfort. But honestly, I often talk about with many of my leaders, having courage. You got to be a little brave. Having this conversation, having it the right way is absolutely critical. Couple of things about, some advice. I've done this a few times. Choose the right setting, obviously not in the operation. I often have these tough conversations. I find getting them away out of the office is good as well. I know in today's time it's a little tough. You might be dealing with some people remotely, so get them on the phone. But when I've got a great employee who's delivering results, I love taking them out of the business environment for a little bit. One, it lets them know that I'm committed to them. So taking them to lunch, taking them to coffee, just change up the environment. It does make a difference. Obviously, you need to be prepared because they are smart. And here's the most important thing: reinforce all the awesome things they do. You know, their value to you, their strengths, all the great things. It's like you're trying to turn this around. But then you've got to center the discussion on values and behaviors that are not allowing the rest of the team to excel. And as I said, this is a conversation. So ask, remember we said ask questions, not make a lot of statements. So ask them, do they understand the impact? What sort of impact do you think this would have on maybe some other people in the team or the customers, et cetera? And so allow that conversation to come out, but document it. Create a performance improvement plan and say, just like you did with your twos, say, hey, you're giving me what I need here from the results, but I really need to see some improvement in some of the comments from your peers or wherever that might be coming from. So document it and just like create a plan for them and say, hey, let's check back in. And remember, you're offering yourself to them because again, you don't want to lose these people. So, hey, what time? Whereas with your twos, you're giving time and maybe some training and resources and investing in them. In this one, with this group, you're really giving some time of yourself to check in and give advice and try to help them along the way. I often say, you know, when you have this tough conversation, their response or reaction to the conversation will tell you everything you need to know about how this is going to work moving forward. If they act negatively, they dislike it, they think you're wrong, they think you don't know what you're talking about, you're going to move them to a 4 pretty quick. I'm going to tell you that now. You're going to know, and you need to start mentally preparing for that. But on the flip side, if they're very open and you have a great conversation, you absolutely can shift these 3s very quickly into a 1. And then that's our type 4s. So I kind of touched on it, make those tough decisions. You know, we talked about they avoid making, having tough conversations, even more so, you avoid making tough decisions. You're afraid of being short-staffed, you're afraid of upsetting the status quo. Often you maybe have a great relationship with this person, so you don't want to lose that. Or in other ways, you just don't know how to. What I'm going to say is so important is that, you know, if you're afraid of letting someone go, then reach out and get some help because you have to make the decision. Sometimes employees make better customers than they do employees. I'm going to tell you that now. Some people just don't belong. You know, if we're talking about, you know, like not everyone you should hire, you know, not everyone's a good fit for what you need to do. Unfortunately, some people that are already in place may not be a good fit as well. You're making these tough decisions because you got to put the team first. And again, I put it as simple as that. You're putting, just like I told you about with the dealership, there were 20 salespeople on this team, and they were putting one person first, delivering amazing results. And as a result, you had 19 people that were kind of unhappy in varying degrees. We took the one person out. Now we have 19 people who started to perform better, started to do it. It's not a perfect science, but certainly the fact that in 3 months, total sales had improved as a group. No one reached the lofty goals of John. I want to make that clear. But 18 out of the 90 had improved individual sales, and the overall sales group had improved. And that as an organization is a win-win. So kind of keep that in mind. So that's kind of like a little bit about, you know, performance coaching that I wanted to kind of share some of these ideas with you today. And as I said, sort of start to get you thinking about your plan with your employees. You know, we touched on some key things that hopefully you're kind of taking a note on and kind of say, hey, I can help apply this. So I'm wondering now, maybe Abraham, before we sort of go any further, if there's any questions that are coming through from the group that we can kind of, you know, deal with those now. So does anybody have a question about anything we've touched on so far?
I don't see any questions yet, folks. So feel free to, you have a chance here. Shane gets paid a lot, and you have a great opportunity here to get some information that's free here. Stephen says, great content. Thank you, Stephen, for that comment there.
Thank you.
You know, so please, that's what we're here for. Shane wants to help you. He says, can we get a deck to share? He'd like to know if he could have the deck.
Yeah, there's some cool conversations out there. So we're going to actually talk about how you can maybe get the deck, get some more stuff that we've got going on. So absolutely. Listen, you know, in these times we're here to help you. You know, as I said, my investment in you guys is like, how, if we can all be better leaders and get better leadership, I think in certainly times like this, it truly makes a difference. Remember, leadership is about inspiring hearts and minds. You know, coaching is one of the key sort of tenets of leadership that I think we want to focus on. And it's all about just, making people feel good. I often differentiate management and leadership. Management is about that organization of the operation, the scheduling, and all those fundamentals. Leadership is about the people. And that's why, I talk a lot. I have 4 or 5 core tenets of leadership that I work with a lot of different companies, executives, managers on. And performance coaching is one of those tenets. Obviously, there's a lot more information here. And so, again, I really just want to stress from the time frame we have, I wanted to give you a taste of this and at the same time give you some good to-dos, some good reminders, a couple of good quotes that hopefully you can take with you.
Yeah.
Any other questions out there before we
Melissa here. She says, as a team leader, how do I encourage my manager to support my coaching decisions if they aren't on the same page?
Hey, you know what? Fantastic question. So here's one of the things, when you're a frontline manager, you're caught between the rock and the hard place. That's why I love what I've laid out for you today, because it is a strategy. It's a coaching strategy. One of the things that I urge you to do is to take that strategy and review it with your manager, because they have to ultimately support it. One of the things that I often find in coaching is I have managers who come to me and says, hey, I made a decision about an employee and my manager didn't support it. And I often say, I was like, okay, well, how did you approach it? Did you have a strategy? Which means, and again, that's why I go back to that framework and I put it up there, because I often find when everyone's on the same page and has the same strategy, like recognition, I always love to start with that. Tell me a manager that says, oh yeah, we're not going to do any recognition. I'm like, okay, you just don't get it. And then I go to the 2s, enabling them. All right, cool, train. These are fundamentally so basic. And what I love about that grid is it organizes the strategy. Every person has a strategy. And so when you go to a manager and sort of say, hey, here's my strategy for my team, you're not just going and saying, hey, I got John, I think we need to let him go. You're going and saying, hey, I got a team of 20. I've recognized I've got 5 ones, and I want to be able to do a little bit more recognition, delegate some stuff to them, empower them a little bit. Are we good with that? And by the way, what resources can I take advantage of? Then you go, hey, I've got 6 or 7 people, 8 people that fit into a 2 category. Just so you know, I'm going to invest in some more training with them. We did a little survey, found out there was a couple of tools that weren't being used correctly. And so that's what I'm going to do with this group. And then you go, hey, we've got a couple of great performers here that quite honestly cause a little chaos in the team. They're not the best team players. Just so you know, I'm going to have some conversation with them about the importance of our values and getting them in line. At this point, if any manager goes, yeah, that's a really dumb idea, that manager's dumb. Because up until now, you've taken a strategic approach. Then when you get to your 4s, and again, I guess this is probably where your question is, hey, there's one person that I don't think should be on this team because I have laid this out in such a way, I need your support from that. It makes a huge difference. When I have managers who take our approach and then start to apply it and start to utilize it, there's a big change. But I tell you, it's tough when you've got a manager who support it. And by the way, you have this conversation, you'll learn a lot about your manager. And again, I don't know your manager, but unfortunately, there's some bad managers out there. And what I do is fundamentally so basic and works and has been proven for so long. Hey, if you don't have a manager that supports you in your coaching strategy, then maybe you're in the wrong place, or unfortunately probably have the wrong mentor and leader over top of you. So that's a whole different conversation, but certainly something that I'm pretty blunt and open about, that these people are out there. Hopefully you don't have that case. You take your strategy and you get a lot of support, but I certainly know that could be something that you run into. At that point, you've got a much bigger decision to go. I would certainly look with your HR team and maybe some other options to make sure you get the type of support. But approach this strategically, I think you'll get a good result.
I have one here from Jay. He says, if we aren't in the position to make the decisions, but we're tasked with the coaching, what's a good way to recommend things that we say to the decision makers?
So I think that kind of, Jay, that might be a similar question to what I've done here, is that you're not in a position to make those decisions. I get it. And that's very much, you're not in the position to hire, fire. I get it. So go back to what I just said. Have a coaching strategy. you'll be amazed. And again, I put a strategy for your team and say, hey, manager, I want to sit down with you and talk you through my coaching strategy. Oh, okay. What is that all about? And say, hey, here's something I've been working on that I want your help to support. You might be surprised that they're like, hey, wait up, we need everybody on this program. So again, I go back to, I get that there's a lot of people that, particularly frontline managers, who can't make that decision to let someone go. But have your facts and have your backup of why each of your employees or the team you're working with falls into this category. Back it up, have demonstrations. I promise you, it's a really powerful tool to go to your manager and show what you've been working on. And so have that. And again, by the way, if depending on your organization, you may have a coaching plan or coaching program in place that maybe is a little different. I find most organizations have a recognition program. They have a training program. Tough conversations is something that should be happening every day, and people get let go. So that's why I say that these things all probably happen. Unfortunately, I go to many organizations where they're not structured and formalized in such a way that it makes sense. So I urge you to kind of think about what we presented, but also know that there are other ways to organize your coaching thinking. I've just found this over the years to be the very best one, particularly young middle managers. Just a great way to start to organize your thinking. And you know, sometimes you get pushback. Well, that's categorizing someone. And what I'm trying to do is not to say you're labeling people. What you're trying to do is to understand where you need to coach or how to coach in different ways. Often we find the reverse is that our fours we end up spending way too much time with because they're always in trouble. They're always doing something. We're always fixing their mistakes. We're always apologizing for their attitude. And in this strategy, what we try to do is realign managers' time and say, hey, spend more time on your ones, invest in your twos, have those great conversations with your threes. And you know what? Unfortunately, if you're still made to keep those fours, you've made it really clear to your managers, your team, that they're a four and they're overall impacting what is happening elsewhere. It was the same with the general manager of the car dealership. You know, they got told, thank you very much, but there's no way I'm getting rid of John. Unfortunately, it wasn't until John got them into a lawsuit because he was such a jack that things really sort of started to hit home. And unfortunately, sometimes that happens. What I encourage you is the habit of coaching, which is fundamentally thinking about what you're doing. And, you know, even if you say, you know what, I don't get to make the firing decision, I bet you can do more recognition. I bet you can think a little bit about your employees that need some more training, maybe spend some more time with them. I bet you can think about that a little differently, and hopefully you got that out of today, Jay.
I like that. That's, there's many ways that you can take it and, empower yourself to do some good things to improve your performance there of your people. Any other questions anybody want to ask? We're here. We're happy to answer those questions. And also I'd like to ask Jay and Melissa, please feel free to give us some feedback, how things went. Love to hear about it.
Yeah,
you can,
absolutely.
Yeah, please send me an email. I'm at abraham@asadigitalalmarketing.com. I can put down in the bottom right here. And I'd love to hear, what happened there. I'm sure Shane would love to as well.
And by the way, don't be afraid to reach out if you need some more advice. So, we can give you some more ways to get in touch with us and obviously talk about this. It's like everything. If you find this interesting and you want to dig a little deeper, I'm all for it. Again, we've got some stuff that hopefully will allow you to do that, whether it's through my book, through we do some master classes I want to tell you guys about. We do a lot of different things that we work with a lot of different organizations. So I want to be able to make sure you have access to some of that as well.
Okay, so
any other questions?
I think that's it. So I think that Jay says this has been a great resource, so we appreciate that. So continue. I think you have some stuff you want to
so let's just kind of
talk about.
Again, we've kind of touched on this. What did we cover today? Touched on the informal feedback, gave you some of those specific elements to kind of think about. Remember, your informal feedback is the foundation of everything you do. So even, if you go, I don't get to make those decisions, remember every manager starts or every leadership starts with being able to give feedback. Informal feedback's the best way. You don't need permission to do it. You just need to be out there in the operation. And if I can urge you all, if we all got better at informal feedback, we'd be in great space. Obviously, the recognition, I want you to walk away with understanding that there's different people don't always process that thank you the same way. They process information differently, so they process your thank you differently. Therefore, to be effective and to really make our recognition stand out, we want to apply different types of recognition. Remember, say, write, do. I think it's a pretty simple way to think about, hey, I got to say, write, do, and play around a little bit. See how people react to you. We talked, we went into the twos a little bit, but again, making sure they get the training. But really, we touched on the tough conversations. Jack Welch and GE called these the toughest employees to deal with. So again, I get the little bit of discomfort. But you've got to have it. I think bravery and courage is one of the most important signs of being a leader. And having those tough conversations is certainly one of those ways to do it. Making sure that the conversation is aligned around your values. And, the discovery 4 is, listen, you can't be afraid to make those tough decisions when someone's not a good fit. And it's sort of the way that you do that, even if you can't make that decision, engaging the people that do with your HR team, having the facts, lay out the sort of program of why they fall into that category, I think is pretty key. So hopefully that you got some of those to-dos out of today. What I do want to do is talk about my masterclass that, again, if you're interested in this and you want to go a little deeper, we actually do masterclasses for organizations around the world. What I delivered to you today was kind of like a high-level overview, but it's a 2-hour deep dive. We go into, we have an informal feedback model that we utilize. We've probably implemented this in probably over 100 organizations around the world, but we have an informal feedback model that we introduce and take people through. The formal coaching model, again, we go deeper into how to apply it. So, talking a lot more about how to create the strategic approach to coaching. Customized recognition programming for your team and going a little deeper. We got sort of some, real specific examples of the best practices we've learned over the years. Handling those employee conversations that don't adhere to your values. Go a little deeper. And again, we do a program on how to have those tough decisions respectfully, how to have those conversations. There is an art to it. We recognize that not everyone is engaged in that right now or have to do it, but it's a really good skill to start to develop. So again, if people are interested in this, we're going to do a masterclass in a couple of weeks. But I get it. It works for a lot of different people. As I sort of said, whether you're, a CEO, business owner, manager, or frontline supervisor, there's a number of ways where this might help you and apply. Hopefully, as today sort of, got some information and sort of got you into this. I really want to make sure to understand that performance coaching is one of the core tenets of leadership. It's one of the critical sets of skills that you do have to develop and focus on. As I said, we've done it, and again, BMW, I gave you the example at the start of the day. So you know what, we've been really actively involved with them over the years and really making sure to understand that, whether it's our customer first program, and we actually took all dealerships in North America, that we're talking about 496 dealerships, we took them through performance coaching. So just sort of understand ultimately what this does. It's about improving your customer experience in your results. That's where we're taking this. You can't improve your customer experience without some of these results. Yeah, so Abraham, thanks for allowing me an opportunity to jump in with you guys today. Great being part of the CX network and everything that you've got going on. And hopefully we'll see everybody, or at least talk to everybody soon.
Yeah, thank you. And just one, before you leave, Shane, we have, was it next week? I think it's next week. Let me just take a look and see. We have another webinar Shane's going to be doing for us about the 5 C's of virtual leadership. Yeah. I mean, we came up with this real quick. We thought about it. We said, this is the time, people are at home. And like Shane said earlier, is that, hey, you still have to lead your teams. But you might not have any experience in how you're going to lead your teams as a virtual leader right now, but you're still a leader. And Shane has volunteered to be able to help you out by doing another webinar for us, which we're very fortunate for you to do that, Shane. We'll be sending that out to you via email with the link and how you can sign up for that. So you don't have to worry about that. It's all on autopilot for you. And again, please take advantage of this offer. It'll get a closer relationship with the SGI team. It's really worth your time. I mean, I don't know how you could possibly lose on something like this. If you found value in this webinar today and you saw that this stuff's real and you go out and try that stuff, you see you're going to get some results. Imagine what you're going to get on that masterclass. So Thank you so much, Shane. I appreciate it. Thank you, everybody, for coming. Stay safe, stay healthy, and, thank you. That's it.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you, everybody. Great. Cheers.